Judy. How are you?
Good morning, Neibra, and how are you?
I'm well. I spent yesterday a panel of women doing my second series of Real Talk. So it was very, very interesting. And so hopefully those same women and the other audience women will listen to our panel today and they'll learn some things about forgiveness.
You know what? I thought about it and I said to myself, if they would listen to men talk about real issues with women, then listen to the women talk about real issues with men, and then I get to come on and say, okay, let me just put all of this.
The Bible in it.
Let me put all this in a spiritual context for everybody.
That's exactly why we release it the way we do, because we need that. We're not going to forget that relationship with God. So
that's it. And you know, when we did our first series on submission, my point was that submission is a part of life. There are rules and regulations everywhere. We're lawyers, we know that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you go into the marriage relationship, all of a sudden people just balk at submission. And the bottom line of it is submission must be first vertical, and then it can be horizontal. And when the vertical submission to Christ is in line and balanced, then it's easy to do it on the horizontal, because the husband is going to love his wife like Christ loved the church, so he's not
better. He better. If he wants me to submit, he better.
Well, but that wasn't your issue. I'm going to get there. And then it's also, the wife is more comfortable submitting to a man that she knows loves God, because his interest, his concern for her is going to be balanced by his vertical relationship with God. Now, we ended submission. I'm going to just get you on this one. We ended submission talking about, I make the most money, I. And I want to make sure I repeat again what I said, Neibra. There's way too much I in a relationship that's meant to be a we. Okay? I just want to repeat that. And sometimes the I values or use incorrect analysis.
Okay, here we go.
Uses incorrect analysis to realize what's best for the relationship. All right, and I'll leave that, and they can go back and they can listen to that. But I just want to get that back in there. The church,
we, no more I's, we.
It's okay. If it's going to be a relationship, it must be a we.
I'm with you. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just listening.
Now you can't have a relationship with yourself. That would be I, myself, and me. And most times those relationships we would call are unhealthy. And there are a lot. I'm not a psychologist.
Moving on to forgiveness,
which is what we're talking about
today.
We're
supposed to be talking about forgiveness. So
and we are, but we need to lay that foundation, because now that we get to forgiveness, that's going to connect with submission.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So as you all see, this is what we do all the time. It's a constant debate, and we get off topic.
It's not,
but we're here.
It's a chit chat.
Welcome to Friendly Discourse, and so we're here today to talk about forgiveness. As Judy has stated, for episode 1 was about submission. Today we talk about forgiveness.
And the next episode will be on compromise.
And then the final episode will be on freedom.
And that's where we all want to be, free. Free indeed.
All right. Now, I learned from my men's panel that a lot of times women bring baggage into the relationship. Not just the children, but all of the negativity from prior relationship. They bring in the relationship with their new boo, and it causes problems. But men claim that they can recognize it immediately. So, unforgiveness is that baggage that women bring into the relationships that make their new relationship an unhealthy relationship.
Now, Neibra, you know that I got to go always back to the source, okay? Let's just talk about forgiveness.
Okay.
All right. The reason we need to talk about forgiveness is because you are human, I'm human, the entire world is human, and forgiveness is a necessary concept, because all over the world people die, and all over the world people do things that they need to be forgiven from. Both ways. I need to forgive myself, you need to forgive me, I need to forgive you, God, we need forgiveness from God. And I was thinking about this, and I realized that the concept of forgiveness actually comes from the Garden of Eden.
Okay.
When Adam and Eve sinned, they had disobeyed God, and they needed forgiveness.
Yeah.
And then when we get to the New Testament, everybody knows the Lord's Prayer. And it specifically says, forgive us as we forgive others. And Jesus also said, if you come to worship Him, and you remember you have ought a problem with your brother or your
Yeah.
sister, in this case may be, or you make it brothers and sisters, you need to go get that straight. So the real issue here with forgiveness, and you're talking about baggage, is it is baggage. Because forgiveness puts us in chains. It puts us in chains.
Chains?
Chain.
Right, bondage.
Bondage, puts us in bondage. If we don't have a forgiving spirit, we can't expect God to forgive us, and we can't expect other people to forgive us. You give what you get. And God has made it so plain that before He's going to forgive us, we have to forgive others. And we need to forgive ourselves. I want to stop and make that. We need to forgive ourselves.
So what comes first? We ask God for forgiveness.
God
then we
has told us
forgive
what comes
ourselves,
first.
and then we forgive others?
No, actually, God said, if you come to worship me, but you have aught against your brother or sister, or brothers, brethren and sisterin, you need to go get that straight.
So you get it straight with the forgiveness with the other person before we go to God and ask for forgiveness.
He says that He's going to forgive us as we forgive others.
Okay.
That's what He says. He's going to forgive us as we forgive others. So it is a recognition, if I'm still carrying baggage from my last boo, what I'm saying is, I haven't worked through that concept of forgiveness. I haven't forgiven him for what he did to me. I haven't forgiven myself for what I did to him.
Uh-oh. So we have to look deep within ourselves, so it's not just that he hurt me, he cheated on me. There's actually some accountability that we need to take?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Man, I think a lot of us miss that.
I think a lot of us miss that too. Because a lot of times we want people to ask us for forgiveness of what they did to us. And I'm thinking to myself, why were you offended in the first place? I mean, why, Neibra, do I want you to forgive me? Let me put this right. You did something to me. And I think you should come and say to me, Judy, I'm sorry I did such and such and such.
Right.
But actually, Judy needs to stop and think, why was I offended when Neibra did that?
So that's the accountability, inner accountability.
Yes.
So we need to figure out why we were offended.
Why we're offended. Because sometimes we're offended and there's no reason to be offended. It's not like the person woke up this morning and said, you know, I think that I should go
And hurt somebody.
and put a name on who the somebody is, and I'll hurt them like this. Okay? Now, there are evil people in the world. We agree. Can we agree on that?
We agree.
Okay, there's some evil and wicked people. But we like to think that the world that we live in, the space of those who are in our space, we keep a short list of them, and we get them out of our space as soon as we can.
We like to think.
Well, actually, one of the things I'm going to encourage us to do is to go back through that list and check out the expiration dates on some friendships, and we need to let those people go because they're requiring too much forgiveness. Now, I know we're supposed to give 70 times 70. I'm good with that. Okay. However,
don't waste all of your forgiveness on same person over and over again.
We just need to put it in balance. God is going to forever forgive us until the judgment is all over.
Right.
But forgiveness just doesn't mean you give people free tickets.
Well, let's talk about what forgiveness is, because I can easily say, Judy, I forgive you, or I'm gonna pray about it and then I'm gonna go forgive people. But how do we do it? How do we express forgiveness to people? Do I have to go and call them up when I hadn't talked to them in a while?
Well, you know, they're all levels of this, because some people you won't have the privilege of being able to say to them, I forgive you, nor will you be able to get them to say to you, I forgive you. Now, we're lawyers, we're seasoned lawyers, we've done enough domestic violence and all of that stuff in our space, okay? And we know enough about child abuse and things, bad things that adults have done to children, all right? And in many cases, the perpetrator is not going to say,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Right.
But the damage that was done to the child, and since we're a women's program, the damage that was done to the little girl is a damage that literally encapsulates her life. And in order for her to get free of that bubble, she has got to let it go. Not that forgiveness means that I forget what you did to me, and this is broadly speaking,
Right.
forgiveness doesn't mean that I forget what you did to
Good.
me. It doesn't mean that I absolve you of what you did to me, but I no longer give that power over me.
Okay.
Forgiveness is for us.
So forgiveness is it's a release of all of that hurt and pain, all of that trauma, in order for you to be free.
In order to be free.
In order for the other person who hurt you to not have control of you.
That's it. And we know in domestic violence relationships, abusive relationships in particular, it's all about power and control. And stop and think about it for a minute, Neibra. Some of the people in our lives who have hurt us and have not, and do not, and won't ask
Right.
for forgiveness, they could care less that we're over in the corner moaning and groaning
Mm-hmm.
and blocking our future
Mm-hmm.
and carrying that heavy luggage. They could care. My son said to me, Mom, he just picked a number out the airline, maybe 10 million people in some Scandinavian country,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, and guess what, Mom? Not one of them care about you. You know, and that's kind of like, that's putting it in perspective. You're important, but the world,
Not that important.
the world doesn't turn on you. It really doesn't. And so you're sitting here being angry and mad
And hurt.
and hurt about what someone did to you, and the other person is like, and so?
And I know that to be true because in my process of forgiveness, I've gone to people who've hurt me maybe years in the past, and I've told them that I forgive them, and their response is, for what? Oh, I didn't realize that that bothered you. And so they've lived their last couple of years not have clueless that they said or did something to hurt me. And now it's like I'm closing a wound, I'm healing, and they're now just realizing that they did something. And it's always kind of embarrassing to me when they say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it. And I'm going, you didn't realize you hurt me? And they're like, no.
And it's quite possible to do that. Why? Because they had no idea that you had a sensitive big toe.
I know.
Well, actually, make it a sensitive little toe. It should know. But I mean, people do things. I'll give you an example. I have a friend, and we were cruising, and she asked me for something, and I threw it at her. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
She went off on me, and I'm just kind of like, I didn't. And the difference is, I grew up with 7 brothers and sisters. We threw things all of the time. It had nothing to do with nothing, but I don't feel like getting up and taking it to you, so
Just get there faster. Like
it gets that fast. But it was very, very offensive to her. Now, of course, she pointed it out that it was offensive to her, and my response was, I'm very sorry that I offended you, but I didn't know that was an offensive thing.
Mhm.
And so in our relationships, we got to really spend some time. This is really a two-pronged conversation we're having here. This first one is, we got to spend some time realizing why we're offended.
Right.
Because what the person did, from where they're coming from, it was an offensive. I didn't know that I hurt your feelings. And you're walking around here 5 years later, mumbling and grumbling because I threw something at you that never crossed my mind was offensive.
Right.
And then there's the other category where people have done wrong. When adults abuse their relationships,
Mhm.
okay, and take sexual advantage of boys and girls, okay?
Yeah.
They are...
And it's not just to clarify,
Yeah.
not just the harm and abusive sexual, you got the sexual, you got the physical abuse, but you got the infidelity, you got a whole range of things that people do that hurt people, that the victim of it needs to ask for forgiveness or need to forgive.
No, the victim needs to forgive.
Forgive, not ask for forgiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about...
And I was trying to use an example that everyone could relate to, because as we move further, then we will talk about in the marital relationships. Oh yeah, there are a lot of things that spouses do. And I like that scene out of Waiting to Exhale, whatever that song was. We took our vows, and I don't get this part.
The Angela Bassett part when she's burning his stuff? Is that the part you like?
Yeah, not the burning stuff, but where she says, I don't...
No, we gotta burn the clothes and sell them for $1. I mean, we gotta, that's definitely forgiveness, Judy. No? No.
Well, I'm not going to get tied on that one. I'm going to stick with the first part, the song that says, I don't get that part. How we can stand and make these vows to each other. And then we do things that, by definition, we all know are breaches of that vow. You said you're going to love me forever, and then I find out you got a boo on the other side. Or you find out I got a boo on the other side.
Right.
Nowadays it's equal opportunity. Or you are putting the family's finances in jeopardy because when you get your check, instead of bringing it home to take care of the family, you're doing other things. You're wasting it on drugs and alcohol, gambling, another boo. Pick
a whole range of things.
So yeah.
So for a lot of people, they want to forgive. They want that freedom. They want to release that control. But what do they do? Like, say somebody harmed them and the person is not within their vicinity. So give me examples of ways that they can show forgiveness.
I'm not so concerned really about the outward issue of forgiveness as I'm concerned about the mental. And the spiritual. One of the books that I've read that I found really helpful to me was Kendall's book, R.T. Kendall's book on total forgiveness. Now, there are a lot of books out there on forgiveness, but this one just really, really resonated, or I should say it cracked my heart shell. He says, you know you've forgiven someone when you can ask God to bless them with the exact same blessings that you want for yourself. And I have learned now, when people say that they're praying for me, my response is, and I'm going to ask God to give back to you
Whatever you prayed
for me. And there have been some times in my life where it has taken work to get there. Because my first response is, I'm like David, Lord, take them out, just wipe them out.
I think that's everybody's first response. If the hurt is a deep hurt, then you're like, okay, God, I can't do it. I can't pray for them. You want to say take care of them, but you want to tell God how you want them to take him to take care of them.
Oh, David
and it needs to be very painful. That's not a good prayer, but that's where your mind is going. So sometimes with me, I have to just wait because my prayers are not going to be sincere initially.
No, they're not. And that again goes back to what I'm talking about. The outward manifestation cannot be proper until the inner work has been done. So most people though is a Carrie Ten Boom, who was part of the Nazi, a Jew who is incarcerated in the concentration camps, and she talks about literally seeing the soldier who facilitated the death of her sister. And all of this is going on in the concentration camp. And then she became converted, and she goes around and she talks, I'm about the converted part, but she goes around talking about forgiveness. And that night in the audience is that man. And he comes up and he outstretches his hand and he asks for forgiveness. And she said, it's a powerful story. And I think Google is such a wonderful thing, so Google it. But the point of it is, the point of it is, how can we talk about God forgiving us if we can't forgive others?
Yeah. So let's talk about, okay, so we got a general concept of what forgiveness is. And I know we talked about, you talked to me about your book, Total Forgiveness. So help us understand what forgiveness is not. And I know one of the things, and you've already said this, it does not mean that I forget what that person has done to me. Is that correct?
No. Well, you forget in the sense, I think someone has said, I can't quote it exactly. I no longer carry it around. That's a piece of luggage I've put down. And what I really have forgotten is where I put it.
Yeah, you talked about, when you and I talked about this just between us, you talked about that Band-Aid, that scar. The scar is there, you keep ripping the Band-Aid off, and then after a while you know the scar is not there. That's when you know that you've totally forgiven the person. Do you remember the discussion?
Yeah, but not that the scar is not there. It is, from the inside, it has healed. from the inside. Because you can still have a scar on the outside, but the inside hasn't healed. So forgiveness is when it has no more power over me. When I remember the event and there's a flat response. A flat response. And the best example I can give you of that is I was sexually abused as a child, and of course I didn't know that until I went to counseling for something totally different. And as I'm walking out the door, the counselor says to me, "Have you ever been sexually abused as a child?" And I was offended by the question. It was way over in the night, where my mind went way back, and I remembered what had happened to me. I eventually saw the man, who had done it to me as a 5-year-old child. And my first response was to go up and say, "You remember when you saw so-and-so?" And then I thought for a moment, and I went, I don't see myself as a victim. I see myself as a survivor. That has no more power over me. Now, I can trace other behaviors in my life thanks to the counseling that resulted from that. But because I've been able to identify them, I'm also snipping that power over me as well. And so, you know you've totally forgiven when it has no more power. It rises to the level of when Jesus says he forgives us, hallelujah, he throws it into the bottom of the sea. He remembers throwing it in the bottom of the sea, he just didn't know where he is, so.
Right, okay.
Does that make
So
sense?
it makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we know it's not, you're not going to forget. It just no longer has that control over you. So what else is forgiveness? What else is it not? Forgiveness is not.
Forgiveness is not.
It doesn't mean you have to reconcile with the person. I mean, whether it's a friendship or prior relationship, does it mean that I've forgiven you, so now you can start calling me again, we can start hanging out with each other?
All of that I leave based on the specifics of that relationship, because let's take it, this conversation is about intimate marriage relationship. Many people will tell you after the infidelity and they really have forgiven themselves, each other, and God has forgiven them, they'll tell you in a heartbeat the relationship post-infidelity is better than it ever was before, because they worked. This relationship, this marriage now has real, pure gold value, because they worked for it. Okay, so you can't make a blanket rule. What you can say is forgiveness doesn't give the other person permission to continue to inflict that pain on you. Okay. Forgiveness doesn't absolve the person of what they've done, but forgiveness doesn't make you anymore the judge and jury and the executioner. It's a recognition of, you hurt me, I've forgiven you for what you did to me, and I leave you in God's hands.
So what do you say to the women? This was a discussion on my panel discussion with the ladies yesterday. One lady said, we were talking about infidelity, and I said, after going over a lot of other things, how many ladies think that if their significant other or husband cheated on them after today's panel, that they would leave, just automatically leave just based on that? All things even, everything seemed to be okay, but the only thing is you find out tomorrow that he cheated on you. And one of the ladies said, I would absolutely leave, because if he did it once, he'll continue to do it over and over again. And I said, why is that the case? Why do you believe that's the case? And she said, because it happened in a prior relationship. She'd forgiven him, and he continued to do it over and over again. So there's a lot of women that feel that way. So while we're closing out this forgiveness section, what do you tell women who come to you and they say, I want to work on this forgiveness, but when it comes to a marital relationship, I refuse to forgive him because it gives him permission to continue to hurt me?
Sounds like they didn't listen to the men's panel, because the men said infidelity didn't have a whole lot to do with emotions at all. It's totally a bodily movement. No, I don't want that on my tape. No, ma'am.
Yes, it is.
No. It is a physical need. And so
you don't like that bowel movement thing.
No, and I don't want that. Strike that. It is for men. Men are attracted to women. And so the real issue goes back to pulling out of submission. When a man is submitted to Christ, then his emotions come under the authority of Christ. And his relationship vertically absolutely controls his horizontal relationship. So he may see it and he may think, that looks like a good booty call. And then he hears the Holy Spirit saying to him, we don't think like that, we don't do like that, because now you're totally out of submission to your Heavenly Father. And by the way, you get ready to go through a serious period of asking Him for forgiveness. And let's think about that for a moment. Do you want to have to go through all that aggravation, asking the Lord to forgive you? Or just go on home to your stuff? Okay?
Yeah.
So we do a lot of things ourselves that puts us in a position of pain. We are inflicting pain on ourselves. And when we come to realize how we have hurt our Creator, that's a whole nother level. I use Jim, bless his soul. He used to say stuff to me, and it would just kind of roll. But whenever he could put it into a spiritual connection, that I have misrepresented Christ, that's a bullseye. Now that always went straight to it, because then I go, that's a problem. And a couple times in my life I've done things that when I look back on it, it belied my testimony. It cheapened the value of the gospel. That's a real pain for me. A real pain for me.
Well,
and there are a lot of times I don't want to, they're just things I don't want to ask the Lord to forgive me for. I'm sorry, I just, we're
you
gonna pass
don't
on
want to
that.
ask Him, but you gotta ask
No,
Him.
I don't want to do it so that I have to ask forgiveness.
Oh, that's good.
That's what I'm saying. The thought of having to ask forgiveness for this, I'm doing a cost-benefit analysis, and I'm going,
I don't want to do that.
Oh, yeah.
I'd rather not do that, because I know I'm going to have to ask God for forgiveness. And
And-
that's not something I want to take to meditation tomorrow.
right, and the ramifications of it is, the cost is, sin always costs more than you thought you were going to pay. Always. Very often, very seldom can we use absolutes. Sin always costs more than you thought you were going to pay.
Well, we talked about submission. Now we've talked about forgiveness. Do you have any final words for the ladies out there?
My word would be this: sisters. Forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness is your, on the divine, the vertical axis, it is a relationship where you can go to sleep with a good conscience. On the horizontal level, it is breaking the control and the power that other people have over you, because you walking around mad and upset because they did this and that to you. Let it go.
Because they could care less.
Not only do they care less, you can't settle the score anyway. However, if you pray about it, it's amazing. God will settle the score. And when God settles the score, oh, it's settled.
Well, thank you, Judy. It's always a pleasure. It's been wonderful. So I look forward to talking to you next time about compromise.
We will. And that'll be our third step.
Great.